and he was the CEO of Accolade. So as one Jim to another, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to be with you today.
Fantastic. Let's just jump right in. What is conscious leadership, and what led you to that concept?
Well, to me, conscious leadership is about bringing authenticity, awareness, and compassion to your leadership style. And, I was attracted to conscious leadership because I think outside of work and outside of my role as a CEO, I was attracted just to pursuit of consciousness in general. And so, this is conscious leadership's been around for some time, forever. It's just becoming more popular, and I work closely with the Conscious Leadership Group. Diana Chapman, Jim Dethmer wrote a great book, The 12 Commitments to Conscious Leadership, which really summarizes a lot of the great practices of conscious leaders.
Well, how do you go about creating conscious leadership, or how do you implement it?
Well, I think you do it a few ways. It starts with how you personally show up as a leader. So, I try to show up in a way that's present, open, curious, authentic, trying to tell the truth. It's about keeping your agreements and having high integrity. It's about having self-awareness. And so, it starts with yourself, but then it also goes to, the types of people that you bring onto your leadership team and the types of people that you bring into your company in general, and then the culture that you create and the values that you demonstrate as a team and a company.
You mentioned being authentic, and what are the traits of an authentic leader?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked to define authenticity, but perhaps the simplest expression of that for me is telling the truth, bringing your full, real self to work, being honest with people, being as open as possible. There's lots of forms of authenticity. One of the forms of authenticity that we practice as a company is what we call default to open. We try and make sure that we share everything we possibly can. So the company's goals are open for everybody. Everybody can see everyone's objectives and key results for the quarter. Our metrics, our financial results. We try to operate as openly as possible, both inside the company and with our customers and partners as well.
Not everybody has the self-awareness to know whether they are being authentic or being genuine. How would someone look into themselves? Someone listening to this podcast and they say, I wonder if I'm a authentic leader. How do they find that out? Can they?
Yeah. Absolutely they can. I think it's hard. One of the traits that I find of conscious and authentic leaders is they're curious and open, right? And, sometimes people confuse authenticity with just saying whatever comes up in their mind, right?
Yeah.
And so under sort of the charade or guise of authenticity, people could be cruel and not particularly conscious. And so one of the important things about being a conscious leader is, having this self-awareness, having compassion for others, staying curious, looking at how the opposite of your story could be as true as your story. I think really conscious people are simply thoughtful. They know that they have a belief, but they're able to stay curious about how that might just be a story and how the opposite could be true as well.
That's very interesting. How do you think that conscious leadership impacts business?
Well, I think it's having a big impact on business. One of the elements of conscious leaders is they tend to be more mindful. And there's a pretty big movement across business and across America around mindfulness. You look at companies like Headspace and Calm and their popularity. You look at the number of leadership conferences around the country around mindfulness, and I think it's leading to a new generation of leaders that are more authentic, more aware, more compassionate, and more mindful.
Can you give me an example of conscious leadership? Perhaps how it's been successful at Glint?
Yeah. I can give you a couple examples around that. One example would be that a couple of years ago, one of our customers asked us to build some functionality in the product. And it was a feature that we could build. It would leverage some of our advanced technology, but we felt like it wasn't the right thing to do. We felt like it would violate our authentic relationship we have with employees and managers that use our product. And so it was really easy for us to say no, despite the fact this was a large customer and it was willing to pay us a lot of money for this particular feature, because we just knew it wasn't consistent with our values and our culture and our commitment to our customers.
Yeah, that's really important. I don't think that everybody operates that way. It's always easy to sacrifice some of your values if a little bit of money is involved, or a lot of money.
Yeah, you see this. You definitely see this. A bunch of companies are getting pressed now. I think there's a lot of pressure as a public company in particular to hit certain metrics, to monetize your business in a certain way, and sometimes people make mistakes.
Yeah, we talk about leadership and leadership decisions a lot on this podcast because, pretty much every aspect of HR can be influenced by who the leaders are and their self-awareness and, whether they're a conscious leader or not. Would you say that you have a culture of consciousness leadership at Glint?
Oh, totally. We work hard to maintain it. So one of the things, for example, we do on my executive team, this is a sort of a small tactical example, is we do issue clearing on my executive team, where we have on the agenda of my weekly exec team, we have an opportunity for anybody to clear an issue that they have. So one of the things that you do if you've got a conscious leadership team is you try to minimize your withholds, right? And so if somebody has an issue, we bring it up and we talk about it. And that's just one issue. Our culture is really committed to collaboration. I'd say one of the hallmarks of our culture is we found a way to build a culture that was high performance, yet also very collaborative. So we definitely have a we, not me kind of approach. And, that starts with the leadership team, but it extends throughout the organization.
There's a lot of talk these days about work-life balance, and a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on that, but, increasingly people, what they do at home really influences how they work, and whether that's before they go to work or after they go to work. What steps do you take outside of being physically at work to ensure that you can come in each day as your authentic self?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I do to do that. One is I have a daily meditation practice that I've had for next month. It'll be 29 years.
Wow.
Where, every weekday, not on the weekends, I give myself the weekends off, but every weekday I get up and I meditate for an hour. And that's a way that I, train my mind to be more mindful and practice. The second thing I do is, I take care of myself. I exercise, eat right, and live healthy. I also am, sort of a passionate reader of sort of conscious leadership and mindfulness types of books and blogs and newsletters and Instagram following. And then I also work with coaches. I mentioned the Conscious Leadership Group. I've worked with Diana Chapman there for several years, and she comes in and works with my team. And, we do tune-ups to make sure that we're, consistently, applying conscious leadership practices.
Have there been any unanticipated effects of your conscious leadership?
Well, I wouldn't say there's unanticipated effects, but, like anything else that you do, some people just sort of migrate to these things and it just feels like a glove. And other people, it's a little uncomfortable for, right? A lot of our culture is around sort of keeping things in, not sharing emotions, white lies, etc., that people sometimes will use to protect others, etc. And so, sometimes, people join the organization and, for them, it's a little bit different approach, and for them it might take a little while to realize that they can be comfortable bringing their true self to work as well.
Yeah, I mean, change is hard, and it's hard for people to change themselves. It's, over time you find that you turn around and you already did change, so how can other leaders and decision makers at an organization practice conscious leadership at work? What would you say to them?
Well, I think mindfulness is a great starting point because it's so easy to do, and in the short period of time, everybody can quiet their mind, watch their breath, or whatever technique they're going to use. I'd encourage them to have high integrity, to be authentic, to stay open and curious. Practice gratitude. I think gratitude's a really important part of consciousness and conscious leadership. And commit to what we call win-win outcomes. I think a lot of bad behavior happens when we believe that there has to be a winner and a loser, right? You see that in American politics today, right? There's very little us. Or if there is an us, it's because there's an us versus them, not the broader, bigger us, right? And, one of the foundations of our company was to create something that would be a win for everybody, a win for humanity. And I think, frankly, our culture, our society, and for sure our political system right now could just use a little reminder that we actually can create win-win situations.
So, does that mean taking a look every time that you think you have to make a sacrifice and seeing, can you, because a sacrifice is the opposite. It's a trade-off. This for that, and you hear that word a lot in corporations and in business that, we had to sacrifice these team members so that, we could reach our bottom line. Maybe they don't say it quite as directly as that, but that concept is one that a lot of us find acceptable, that you could internalize. And, what role does this win-win concept have to do with, what role does it play with sacrifice business?
Well, I think when you develop that muscle for sort of looking at the greater good and for creating win-win situations, you just naturally begin to migrate to outcomes that fit that. and you don't necessarily view things as a sacrifice. And you're right, sometimes as a business, you do need to reduce your expenses in order to survive, right? Luckily we never had to do that here because we were very successful and growing very quickly. But the reality is, companies often expand and contract. In order to survive, you have to reduce your expenses, and people are one of your largest expenses. And so, sometimes you have to do that, and you have to look at it as the right decision for the business in its entirety. But when you make that decision, you can also do it compassionately and make sure, you're giving people the right resources, the right severance, and you're treating people fairly as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's nothing worse than an unhappy breaking off of employees. I mean, from an HR standpoint, you're looking at retaliation. You're looking at, from employer branding standpoint, people going out there saying, I worked at this company for 8 years, and and I didn't even get a thank you when they let me go or something like that. So I could really see that critical part of being compassionate about how you let people go when you manage these hard times, these bumps in the road. What best practices can conscious leaders follow to build a conscious culture in their workplace?
Well, one of the things that they can do, to stay curious and to stay open, you've got to get feedback. So if you're going to build a people-first organization and a people-first culture, you've got to get feedback in order to make sure you're succeeding in doing that. So one of the things, that we see of great companies do is they provide the right mechanisms for getting feedback and having conversations about that feedback. And that's why we built our company. That's what the Glint platform is. Companies use the Glint platform to measure and increase employee engagement and develop and grow their people. And so getting that regular feedback, making sure managers are having conversations with their teams on a regular cadence, making sure you're investing in growing and developing your people. Those are some of the key things that leaders can do.
Well, this has been very interesting, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Listeners, we are always interested in suggestions you might have for what HR Works should cover next. Feel free